Okay, a bunch of new albums dropped this week. Music I've been waiting for, honestly, for years at this point. I can't wait to talk about it. First, Aysanabee, one of the best new artists in this country, back with a new record. Also, Haim's new album just dropped. It's their longest ever. Finally, out at last. The group chat's here. Let's do this. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Kim Wheeler is here. Riley Yesno is here. Emilie Hanskamp is here. Hello to all of you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's nice to do this.
Hello.
Listen, there's a lot to talk about. It's a new music day. It's my favorite day of the week. Riley, I'm going to start with you because we're going to talk about this new Aysanabee album. And Aysanabee's from your neck of the woods, from Thunder Bay. How does that change how you listen to the music of a person?
Oh my gosh, when I found out that he was from Thunder Bay, I was like, what high school did he go to? Where do I know him from? And then I found out that he actually grew up in a little smaller town, like just outside of Thunder Bay. So I was like, it all makes sense why we aren't friends on Facebook yet. But I first saw him play live before I heard any of his music, really. And it was like an unexpected thing because I was at Tanya Talaga's book launch and he was opening for her. Yeah, just a little name drop there. He was opening for her, and not that the production on this album is bad by any means, but I think he really shines when it was just like him and a guitar and was just finger picking like crazy, and started to sing and just like silenced the entire hall. And I was like, wow, I didn't come for this, but I would come again and again for it. So after that, I was so excited for this album. And from my quick listens, it hasn't disappointed.
I should say, like last week, the Tanya Talaga actually received an award at the Canadian Journalism Foundation. And right before she received her award, Aysanabee got on stage to just kind of give her like a little tribute. And he told a little story, and the audience was sort of like meandering in attention a little bit. And then he started playing, and then exactly the same thing happened. Just like a hush falls over the room. You're like, oh, you have all of my attention. We're gonna get to the music in a second, but Emily, I want to ask you because you worked with Aysanabee, right? You want to talk about this?
Yeah. Around 2017, we were both web journalists working at CTV News, shoulder to shoulder, and especially in a city like Toronto, if you had $1 for the number of times someone was like, "You should come to my open mic night." So he's like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Yeah, 100%."
Yeah,
had I known
that
this, lovely, relatively soft-spoken in conversation man had the voice, a voice so powerful, Hosier would weep hearing it. Like, it's just, to all of your point, I mean, he is someone who I bring people blind faith to his shows all the time because once he opens his mouth and you hear that voice, I did not know this web journalist had it in him. The moral of the story is someone invites you to their open mic night, go because they might be the next Aysanabee.
100%. I'm now keenly aware that I've not played any Aysanabee during this conversation. Let's just hear a little bit of the new album.
It's in the way we're thrown into this world we're thrown. It's in this flesh that's born. It's in the way we're born. It's in the way we're born.
Honestly, again, you meet him, the softest spoken person on the planet, and then this gigantic voice just emerges. That is called The Way We're Born. It's from Aysanabee's new album, Edge of the Earth. Kim, give us a sense of Aysanabee's journey up to this point, because I feel like there's so much anticipation for this album, and maybe some people don't know why that is.
Oh, I guess maybe it's because he won 2 Juno Awards.
Including Songwriter of the Year, 100%.
Category, right? Which is a huge, huge award. His album was also listed for a Polaris Prize. I think it was shortlisted, or longlisted. And he has that instant recognizable voice. I mean, you hear it and you think, "Oh yeah, this is him." And I heard one of his songs being played on mainstream radio the other day here in Winnipeg, and that doesn't happen a lot for Indigenous artists. So I was driving in my car and I was like, oh my God, they're playing Aysanabee. And I get so excited when I hear our people on mainstream radio.
Hey, do you want to tell the story of the first record? Because I feel like Wateen kind of came out of nowhere and then just kind of like took the music scene by storm a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. He made this incredible record where he sat down and he had conversations with his grandfather. And it was during COVID. And he recorded those conversations. And then he used them to weave a story throughout his first album, Watson, which is named after his grandfather. And actually, Aysanabee is also named after his grandfather. He took his grandfather's name from his colonial name, which is Evan, but now he performs as Aysanabee. Yeah, it was such an incredible album, and like I said, it got him. I think that was the album that got him shortlisted for Polaris. And when you have an album like that, every single album afterwards, you anticipate, right? You're like, what's he going to do next? What's he going to do next? And then with this album, he's given us a new sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much bigger sound on this album. I want to come back to that in just a moment. But as you sort of mentioned there, like this idea of making a record that is entirely around his grandfather's story, his grandfather's experience in residential schools, that sort of forms like the narrative framework of that record. When you get to this new album, this album is like highly anticipated. Emilie, is there a conceptual framework to this record, or is he like, man, let's talk about love? You know, like where are we at with Aysanabee right now?
I think to your point, you know, if his first album was his grandfather's story, his second was more so like a breakup album, which is about you, but it's largely about a relationship, maybe the other person who you were in that relationship. I think this album is actually the album is most inward and about himself. About, you know, you think of Edge of the Earth, you kind of picture yourself at the edge of this cliff, your toes hanging over, you think of these leaps of faith that you take. And I think it's taking stock of the leaps he's taken, the losses that have been both for and against his will, the people he's lost. You know, there's a song about losing his grandfather. There are songs about heartbreak and relationships falling apart. There are songs about love. So I really think it is actually his most personal in that sense yet in terms of how inward it is. So I think conceptually that's where he's landing here.
What about Riley, when you listen to this record, like what's the aspect that's like most, you know, jumping out at you?
Yeah, I mean, well, so when I was listening to it, I went and actually had to read the write-up that you did, Emilie, in The Star about him. And he mentions in it to you that he like took inspiration in his earliest years from like Bob Marley and all of these things.
Reggae Evan.
I know. And I was also, it started to smile because when I like lived on the res, we had like just like cassette tapes like all over the place. And a fun fact is that every Native I've ever met loves Johnny Cash. They love Bob Marley. They love like that sort of timbre of the voice. And I think I can hear that in the way that he sings, and you can hear it on this album. And so while it's not necessarily maybe as explicitly as like a quote unquote about like Indigenous topics like residential schools with his grandfather in the first one, to me it is so Native still in also that connection to I feel like the music that Native people love. And I really feel that when I listen to it.
I just want to play another track from the record. Let's hear the title track.
In a clear mind, I don't care either way, won't go back to that place for the first time. Walking to the edge of the earth and I still live in thought of you.
Nothing soft about this record, Kim. I feel like it's a lot of big sounds, big drums, big choruses. It's a far cry from like that sort of original way that we met Aysanabee, like this idea of like a very toned down acoustic folk singer. What do you make of the musical choices that he has on this record, Kim?
I love it. I think that, you know, when you start with something where it is a bit more stripped down and it's acoustic, I think you have to keep moving forward and evolving as an artist. And I think he has proven that is what he is doing with this album, that he is giving us this bigger, richer sound. And, you know, I do work with musicians and in the music industry, but I honestly don't know what goes on behind the scenes and how those musical choices are made. And like, was it because he couldn't afford that sound on the first album? That he created this sound on his third album that he could afford to do more. And it really works.
The idea is like if you can afford to do more and you want to just like blow up the sound and make it bigger, that's the greatest possible thing you could do. And then we sort of meet Aysanabee at this place. Emilie, just a last question maybe on Aysanabee before we move on. You followed his rise from the newsroom, from being like, hey, can you just come see me perform, to this place where like having a highly anticipated record after winning Songwriter of the Year. That's a really big moment. How are you feeling about the way that he has evolved as an artist, as a songwriter?
It's an exceptional story. I mean, we're talking about all these facets of his career. And I'll highlight that his first album came out in 2022. We're talking 3 years.
Really compressed timeline here.
He's played over 300 shows in this time. I want to say Aysanabee is one of the hardest working people in Canadian show business right now. What I love about how he's evolved is, you know, his work ethic, certainly. His songwriting. He won that Juno, but he is such a prolific songwriter. And I think also he's really gained this familiarity with the industry. I think it's fascinating how he approaches the music industry, an industry that certainly maybe wouldn't have opened its doors to him. He had to really fight to get through with people who brought him through, you know, at Ishkade and everything. But now he's opening the door behind him. He's taking it like a student, and I find it fascinating how he's not only learning it himself, but he's evolving in that way in terms of the community he's bringing along with him. And lastly, sonically, I'm really happy that he's evolved and really leaning into this anthemic, chest-thumping, foot-stomping power of his voice. This is arena alt-rock. This is where Aysanabee sits the best, and I'm really happy he's leaning in and going all the way in with that musically as well.
Yeah, I hear all of these songs and I desperately want to hear them in like the biggest possible stadium there is. Okay, I want to move on to another album that's coming out today, and I'm just so incredibly excited about this one. Let's hear it. Haim is back. So you got Alana, you got Esti, you got Danielle, the sisters, better known as Haim. That song is Relationships. The album is called I Quit. Riley, first of all, I should say, this is their longest album. And you don't really get a lot of like long Haim albums. This one's 52 minutes, 15 songs that we're talking about here. Does it sustain your attention as you sort of like put it on and go like, I'm sticking around all the way to the end of this?
I mean, I did listen to it all the way through, not just because I had to be here to talk about it, but because I enjoyed it. I will say, though, I do think it's a little bit, in my first couple listenings, like a little bit front heavy. I think the first half of the album really shines. And the second half to me is like very much a slowdown and like a little bit of I think, trying to do some things where there's like a lot of bouncing around in approaches. And they had, I think, a bunch of different, very distinctive producers on this album as well. So it makes sense to me that there's such a scope in terms of the type of songs they're putting in there. But yeah, I'm a front half listener. I think it maybe could have done with a couple cuts.
Well, I'd say like that's the thing is like 15 songs is a now kind of a bit of an ask, right? Like sort of say, okay, stick around for this entire run. I do think it thematically at least holds up, even if it doesn't necessarily sonically do so. Emily, for you, as you listen to I Quit, what are the concepts? What are the ideas that Haim are working with here?
I was saying that this album is like when your best friend finally dumps their really crappy boyfriend right before the summer. This is what the album feels like. Yeah. It's like they are quitting.
Like,
yes,
let's go.
They are quitting, you know, the toxic exes, the situationships, the people that are not working for us anymore. They are also quitting, you know, the conversation around Haim has always been, you know, what genre, what lane are they in? Yeah. They walk that forbidden line of rock and pop, never the two shall meet. And I feel like on this album, they're also quitting caring about perception. That, you know, sonically it's much more patchwork genre-wise than we're used to. So I think they're quitting that. So I think they're putting all of these things, these people, this toxicity, these narratives that don't serve them in a pile. They're burning it and they're walking off into the California sunset in unison, because I'm convinced that Haim walks everywhere in a line in unison, because that's what every single music
They're not triplets. There's like a 6 or 7 year difference between the oldest and youngest one. But having said that, like there is something about the ways that they kind of like share a hive mind. Like they sort of seem to be. They talked about how this record was kind of like mostly written during this like exceptional period where the three of them were single.
Can you imagine? I want that documentary.
Right? Like what does that period kind of look like? But also, just Haim not particularly ever known for subtlety. And the first song on this album samples George Michael's Freedom in the chorus. And like, I just want to talk about how they don't care what genre you want to put them in. They're like, we're having fun. Is this not fun for you?
100%. Yeah. But they have been forced to care in a way, because especially if you see Haim live, they are a live band. Yes. I will challenge you and duel you if you see them live and refuse to call them a rock band in any sense. So I'm happy they're leaving that behind, but it's something that I had to navigate for so long. So now they're like, you know what? I quit. I'm doing my own thing. 15 songs. Strap in, buddy.
Yeah, have a good time with this one. Kim, what do you make of this record?
So I have not had the chance to listen to all 15 songs.
That's fair.
But back in my day, 15 songs was considered a double album. So you had like two, right? Yeah. 2 pieces of vinyl that you got to listen to. The songs I have heard, I actually really loved them. And you're right. So, like summertime, you're going to put this on, you're going to play those songs over and over again. 17-year-old me would have had it on repeat for the entire summer. Yeah. And today me, I'm going to play that a lot at the cabin this summer. Music has to transport me somewhere. Like whether it's to the past or, today or somewhere in the future, when I'm listening to it, it brings me someplace. And I have to connect with the music to really love it. Yeah. And that's what it does. And it does have, you mentioned California, and it does have that 70s California flavor to it, which, that's, well, maybe
that's a high compliment. I think right? Because that's a big musical legacy, right? Yeah. We're talking about like Fleetwood Mac. We're talking about like Joni Mitchell. I hear Joni in some of these songs, and like that is not a comparison that you make lightly. Do you think it kind of like lives up to that legacy in terms of like trying to create a music that sort of feels so rooted in a place? You think?
Absolutely, yeah. And occasionally, and they're they heard this, they probably hate it, but maybe a little bit of Wilson Phillips in there as well.
No, I bet you the Haim sisters would love nothing more than being compared to Wilson Phillips. Because I do think that like there's something about their maybe rebellious positioning of saying like, like they named an album Women in Music, partly because they're like, yeah, okay, there is something reductive that happens when people think about like women making rock music, but how do we get sort of past that? That's kind of been the whole shtick here, right?
And for the detractors, right? Stevie Nicks said any one of them could have been in Fleetwood Mac. So just take that and...
We're not here to argue with Stevie. That is not a thing that we are built to do. No, not me either.
Also, and who doesn't love a well-placed F-bomb in a song?
Oh. Yeah, in relationships, it's the most perfectly typed. Like, oh, there it is, and it like settles into your bones. It's the greatest, genuinely the greatest feeling. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Emilie Hanskamp is here, Riley Yesno is here, and Kim Wheeler is here, and we are talking about a whole bunch of new music that just came out. And now I want to talk about this.
Look in the mirror, see your eyes. Ask me a question, tell me lies. Look in the mirror, see your eyes.
So that's Bambii. That is Toronto electronic producer Bambii. A little bit of a help there from Hamilton singer Jesse Lanza. The song is called Mirror. Bambii's got a new album that just, it's called Infinity Club 2. It's a follow-up to her album that won a Juno last year. And so, Emily, I want to talk about Bambii and the way that she's so rooted in the club scene here in Toronto specifically. How did she manage to sort of like break out of the underground and just kind of like reach to this place of actually like having global presence? Like she was at Coachella earlier this year. Not that went particularly well for her. So well. But that's not easy to do, right? Like that's a big trajectory there.
No, yeah. I mean, Toronto needed Bambii, continues to need someone like Bambii. I think what's really unique and interesting about her is how organic her fame. She didn't get into this to become to your point, Coachella playing internationally renowned Bambii. She, started playing music because she wanted to hear certain songs she wasn't playing. She started creating these spaces like Jerk because as a queer woman of color, in the club scene and the party scene in Toronto, she wasn't feeling welcome and inclusive in those spaces where it was mostly white men at the decks. So she started kind of leading first with community, leading first with art and music, and everything else followed. So I think what's interesting about her is that she's not compromised on that. Still now, with her fame and her success, she has workshops for young women, for producing, for DJing. So she's managed, it's an interesting kind of case study in what happens when an underground artist does reach mainstream success. How long can they kind of hold on to that DIY mentality? And I think in that sensibility, and she still has. So yes, her music is great, her sets are incredible, and her output is really impressive, but she's really led by that sort of participatory, inclusive kind of idea of music. And I think that is why people have responded so positively to her, and that's why I really appreciate her so much. Not only as someone who's within that scene in Toronto, but who appreciates the music, and we do need that more in the scene. She speaks out.
She does
about the industry and where its shortcomings are, and that's rare to find when you get that level of success.
Oh man, just check out the Bambii Instagram stories and go like, who's getting called out today? Let's go find out. Let's go find out.
She puts her money where her mouth is.
She does.
She really does.
But one thing that I'm interested in, Riley, and maybe like this is a through line between Bambii and Aysanabee, not sonically speaking, but just in terms of like representing where you are and like making a point of saying, I speak from a place. I speak from this particular position. And I guess like that's something that I find myself quite often missing in music, is saying like, I'm listening to a lot of new music. It sounds fine. I'm having a fine time most of the time, but it doesn't feel rooted in a place. It doesn't feel like it's kind of like connected to like, oh, you are trying to tell me a vantage point of like where you are from and how that has shaped how you approach and think about music. Is that something that you listen for, like as you listen to music, or is that is that, or am I being too particular? Because someone on the show said, Elamin, you listen to a little bit too much music critic music, and I take it to heart. I think it's a reasonable point. And so I don't know. What's your approach to this, Riley?
I mean, I don't think that you're being too particular about this. Yeah. I think we've had a conversation, actually, funnily enough, about politics about this, and it translates to music, which is that I think people appreciate a distinction between authenticity and relatability.
Yes.
I think a lot of music and the narratives that they are trying to tell, and they're trying to be here for this moment, they're trying to be relatable. That's well and good. I can listen to that. I like that for certain times. But there's something I think really powerful about an authentic perspective, whether or not the album becomes a flop or is a success or is like just for one moment in time. I think that you're right. Bambii and Aysanabee are perfect examples of making from that place of authenticity and knowing and trusting that the people that it is relatable to will come and find it. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I'll like out myself as not very much an electronic listener, but as I was looking at Bambii for this, I was like, I want to be your friend. How do we become friends? And it's because of who she is, clearly.
Yeah, I think like there's something that sort of like roots you in a place, and you go, okay, I want to spend more time with that. And like, I think I'm particularly allergic to this right now because the number one song in the U.S. and in Canada is a song called "Ordinary" by this guy Alex Warren, and you listen to it and you say, I don't know what this is. And like, sorry, Alex Warren, but like, it just doesn't feel like it's starting to speak to anything. And so it leaves you with a bit of a thirst of being like, okay, can you point me towards what your soul wants to say? Because this doesn't feel like that at all. I
think that when people are trying to reach as many people as possible with their music, you can feel it in their music. And the people who don't try to do that are the people who end up most authentically and effectively reaching more people with their music.
Exactly right. Because you actually have a thing to say. Imagine that. Imagine that. Okay, before we go, I just want to mention that Bambii was shortlisted for the Polaris Music Prize, awarded to the Best Canadian Album. Last week, we found out the 40 albums that made this year's long list. And I feel like now is maybe like the most exciting part of the whole Polaris Prize, because like you get so much new music, and maybe some of it like you haven't like necessarily paid attention to or engaged with, and that's kind of a delight. So I want each of you to pick an album on this long list to maybe recommend to our listeners, because you know what, you're like, hey, this deserves your attention. We have like a minute and a half here, so this has got to be relatively quick. Kim, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, tomorrow is National Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st. I am picking Wyatt C. Lewis.
Speak on it. Love that album.
Yeah, who's Indigenous. He has this stripped down sound. It's whole, it's simple. He puts himself out there emotionally, and it's a slow album. So it's perfect and this is how I listened to it last night. I was lying on my couch and just letting the sound fill my living room, and it was perfect. So it's perfect to listen by yourself or around a campfire with a group of friends.
Love it.
Honestly, love.
It's a beautiful, beautiful album.
Love that White record, truly. Riley, over to you, pal.
Yeah, I mean, when I was perusing, I couldn't not pick Mustafa's Dunya. It is so good. And I was thrown back because Mustafa and I actually first met each other in like 2016 when we were on the Prime Minister's Youth Council together.
All kinds of flexes flying around here. Hey, okay, all right.
Riley's whole life is a flex.
I'll say.
I mean, and he was one of the people I was immediately drawn to there, because if you've ever talked to him in person, he's so funny and light and like whatever. But then you hear this album and it is like, it gets you in the chest.
You,
right?
100%.
So listen.
Emily, over to you. You got like 20 seconds.
I'm going to say Show Sauvage. They are a dance punk group from Quebec. I just saw them in Paris. They blew the roof off. Everyone was drenched through their clothes. Yeah. They are unbelievable. I love anything Talking Heads coded. When you want to dance, you want to, you want to get a little freaky, you want to get a little rocky, a little punky, you need to check out Show Sauvage. And if you can see them live, please do yourself a favor and bring clothes you can sweat through and enjoy it.
I appreciate those recommendations. I appreciate your vibe. You guys are the best. Thank you for your time. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, miigwech.
Yes, of course. Emilie Hanskamp, Riley Yesno, Kim Wheeler. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back on Monday. We would love to see you then.